In the early 1960s, engineers building a dam in northern Italy knew the mountain beside it was moving. They measured it, they tracked it month by month as it moved faster, and they kept filling the reservoir anyway. On the night of October 9th, 1963, that mountain finally gave way, and what happened next remains one of the deadliest disasters in the history of engineering. In the years after World War II, Italy was rebuilding fast, and hydroelectric power was central to that plan. The Vajont Dam, built in a narrow gorge in the Dolomite Mountains, was designed to be one of the tallest dams in the world, a genuine feat of engineering meant to power the growing cities of Milan and Turin. But the valley it sat in had a problem, one that locals had a name for long before construction began. The mountain on one side of the reservoir, Monte Toc, was known in the local dialect as the Rotten Mountain. Its slopes were layered limestone and clay, the kind of geology that's prone to sliding once saturated with water, and the terrain itself showed clear evidence of large landslides in the past. Geologists raised concerns about this instability during planning. Those concerns didn't stop the project. Construction went ahead, and the dam was completed in 1959. Here's the important distinction in this story. The dam itself was never the problem. It was a well-built structure, and, this is worth remembering for later, it survived the disaster almost completely intact. The danger was the mountain beside it. As engineers began filling the reservoir, they were, in effect, running an experiment on Monte Toc's stability, raising the water level and watching how the slope responded. At first, this was treated as manageable. In 1960, a section of the mountain slid into the reservoir, around 700,000 cubic meters of rock, a large amount, but the dam held and the water absorbed it without incident. Engineers responded by lowering the reservoir level and studying the slope more closely. What they found was more concerning than reassuring. Instruments placed on the mountain showed it wasn't just prone to occasional landslides, it was creeping continuously, the entire slope slowly sliding as a single enormous mass. By 1963, that movement had accelerated to several centimeters per day. Locals reported hearing cracking sounds and feeling tremors. Cracks appeared in nearby buildings. The response was to try to manage the mountain's movement by carefully raising and lowering the reservoir, treating the landslide as something that could be controlled rather than a warning to stop entirely. Engineers and geologists debated how large a slide might occur, but continued operating the reservoir while that question remained unresolved. On October 9, 1963, after a period of heavy rain had further saturated the slope, the movement of Monte Toc reached its breaking point. At 10:39 p.m., roughly 270 million cubic meters of rock, an amount of material larger than the Empire State Building many times over, broke away from the mountainside in a single mass. It slid into the reservoir at speeds estimated up to 110 kilometers per hour, around 68 miles per hour. A landslide that size entering a reservoir that quickly didn't just raise the water level, it displaced it violently, all at once, sending an enormous wave up and over the dam itself. That wave has been estimated at up to 250 meters high as it crested the dam structure, roughly 820 feet. The wave came down into the valley on the other side, striking the town of Longarone and several smaller villages with almost no warning. The death toll is estimated between 1,900 and 2,500 people. In Longarone alone, roughly a third of the town's population was lost that night. The dam itself remained standing. It is, in the most literal engineering sense, still there today, largely intact, a fact that says everything about where the true point of failure was and where it wasn't. Vajont is studied differently than most engineering disasters because the structure that failed wasn't really the dam, it was the decision-making process around it. This wasn't a case of a subtle design flaw hidden in a calculation, the way it was at Kansas City. The instability of Monte Toc was documented, measured, and discussed for years before the disaster. Landslide risk on that scale in that valley was not a surprise to the geologists and engineers involved. It was a known and escalating pattern that continued to be managed rather than treated as a reason to stop. Later investigations pointed to a combination of factors: geological surveys that were available but not fully acted upon, commercial and political pressure to keep the hydroelectric project moving forward, and a pattern of responding to each new warning sign, the 1960 landslide, the accelerating creep measurements, the cracking buildings, by adjusting operations rather than reconsidering the project itself. It's a difficult case to reduce to a single lesson because, unlike a design flaw with one clear point of failure, this was a slow accumulation of warnings that were each individually judged to be manageable. The Vajont Dam still stands today. It no longer holds back a reservoir. The valley beneath it was permanently reshaped by the landslide and flood, and the dam has not been used for its original purpose since. Longarone was rebuilt nearby. A memorial now stands for those who were lost. Vajont is taught today in both engineering and geology programs, not as a story about a structural failure, but as a case study in what happens when a warning sign is treated as a problem to be managed rather than a signal to stop.